She is already free. She could be sleeping in a warm bed in Philadelphia right now. Instead, she is lying in the mud, 300 miles deep inside slave territory, listening to search dogs close in. If she gets caught, she dies. But the stakes are even higher than that. There is a family huddled behind her in the dark, trusting her to get them out. To understand why someone makes a choice like that, you have to look at what she came from. Born Araminta Ross around 1822 in Maryland, she grew up in a world where families had zero guarantee of staying together. Children were legally classified as property. They could be sold in the middle of the night, gone by morning, with no warning and no recourse. The defining moment of her youth nearly ended her life. When she was around 12, an angry overseer hurled a 2-pound solid iron weight at another enslaved man. She stepped directly in the way. The iron struck her skull. She barely survived, and for the next 70 years, she would live with blinding headaches and sudden, severe seizures, what doctors today recognize as temporal lobe epilepsy. Following the injury, she began having intense visions she believed were direct messages from God. Whatever those visions were, the trauma did not break her. Instead, it forged an ironclad resolve, dictating every decision she made from that day forward. By 1849, she was 27 years old. Word reached her that she was about to be sold further south. The Deep South meant labor conditions that almost no one survived for long. Faced with a death sentence, she ran. She fled with no map and no compass. She relied entirely on the North Star, moving strictly under the cover of night. Along the way, she had to place absolute trust in total strangers, the covert network of safe houses and quiet abolitionists known as the Underground Railroad. When she finally crossed the Pennsylvania state line, the shift was absolute. She later recalled looking down at her own hands and realizing they actually belonged to her. The sun felt different, the air felt different. For most people, successfully running 300 miles to evade capture is the end of the story. For Harriet Tubman, securing personal freedom was simply step one. It was the prerequisite for the actual work of her life. In Philadelphia, she finally had a job, a community, and physical safety. But the people she loved, her husband, her parents, her siblings, were still trapped on plantations in Maryland. The contrast between her new reality and theirs became impossible to live with. So months after barely making it out alive, she packed a small bag, turned around, and walked directly back into slave territory. When she led groups out, she operated under strict military discipline. She famously carried a loaded pistol. That weapon wasn't primarily for slave catchers. If a passenger panicked and wanted to turn back, they risked exposing the entire group. She made it clear to every person she guided, once we start, we keep moving. Fear was not allowed. She evolved from a desperate fugitive into a highly organized operative. Over the next decade, she orchestrated roughly 13 separate rescue missions, personally guiding about 70 people. Through sheer forward momentum and absolute discipline, she never lost a single passenger. This is a typical wanted poster from the era, showing the kind of money offered for captured fugitives. By the 1850s, the collective bounty on Tubman's head would be worth well over $1 million today. Slave owners were hemorrhaging valuable labor, and they were completely bewildered. They assumed a massive network or some wealthy white abolitionist mastermind had to be orchestrating these precise, flawless extractions. There was no massive network. The mastermind crippling the local slave economy was a solitary, 5-foot-tall, formerly enslaved woman, working almost entirely alone in the dark. When the Civil War broke out, she took those same infiltration and survival skills directly to the Union Army. She slipped behind Confederate lines to map territory and gather critical intelligence, operating as an official scout and spy. In June 1863, her intelligence paved the way for the Combahee River Raid. She stood alongside Union commanders as Union gunboats pushed upriver to strike Confederate supply lines. That single night, more than 700 enslaved people rushed the riverbanks and boarded those boats to freedom. She started out running through the woods as a hunted fugitive. By 1863, she was a tactical leader helping command the military might of the United States. You would expect a military veteran with her record to retire comfortably. That didn't happen. The U.S. government fought her for decades over a proper military pension, leaving her to scrape by in near poverty. Instead of stepping back, she found new battles. She campaigned fiercely for women's voting rights, and on a small plot of land in New York, she physically built a home to serve as a sanctuary for elderly and impoverished Black Americans who had nowhere else to go. This reveals the defining principle of her character. She fought with everything she had to acquire her own freedom, solely so she could spend the rest of her life giving it to other people. Harriet Tubman had no vast wealth and no formal title. Her historical power came from a single, repeated decision: the willingness to walk back into the dark, again and again, for the sake of someone else.